So something's gone wrong. You need help figuring it out. Check the logs. We're going to take a look at a problem today and investigate using log messages to try and figure out what went wrong and how to fix it. So let's take a look at our broken machine and see what happens when we try to start up the HTTPD service. So I'm going to run systemctl start HTTPD, and the resulting message is just an error, right? The service failed to start. But notice that it very helpfully gives me a command to run to inspect any additional messages that could have caused that error or have been output because of that error. So we're going to just follow its instruction. journalctl -xeu httpd.service. And what we're looking at are the output lines from the service logs for the HTTPD service that we tried to start up. And it failed. And we can see right here, there's an error message that says syntax error on line 47 of this configuration file. Then the next line down gives us a little bit more depth. Port must be specified. And then it tells us the roundup of the service, that the main process is exited and it failed with a weird result, and that it failed to actually start Apache up. All right, but those first two lines that we talked about, there's an error on line 47 in this file. The port must be specified. Those are the things we need to pay attention to in order to move to the next step to try and reconcile this problem. My terminal window is a little bit small, but I know that the error, because I made it, is in the httpd.conf file. If my window was a little bit bigger, we would be able to see the full file name in the log. It's in there, we just can't read it in the journalctl output. So if I go into etc httpd conf httpd.conf and then move to line 47, there's a listen directive. And a listen directive tells it what port it should listen to. And you can see that my port is set to 80J. Ports are usually an integer value, a number, and yet mine is 80J, an extra character that is not a number. That's what's causing my syntax error. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that by removing that stray character. And maybe it got inserted when I was moving around in VI and I was in insert mode, but tried to use a movement key and I left this artifact. Right? It happens. All right, then we're going to save and quit. And let's try to restart that service. Systemctl start HTTPD. Oh, still failed. Let's see what happened this time. This time it says line 85 of the SSL configuration, that there's a problem with the certificate file, and then that the service is exited abnormally, and etc., etc. All right, so we could then go further and try and troubleshoot this line 85 of this configuration file for SSL certificates. But you get the point, right? There's a error. We go into the log. It tells us things like a better description of the error, maybe a place where we need to look for our error, and we can go from there. But not every service logs through journalctl. Some services will maintain their own log files, and others will use another logging service on Red Hat distros called rsyslog. And they store logs in a different place. When we're using journalctl, is actually pulling, based off of our specification, service-specific messages out of this big pile of logs. Well, it turns out that big pile of logs also went into a plain text file. And traditionally, that's where we look for log messages on Linux. All right, so I'm going to start up my service one more time, and then we're going to take a look at that log file through rsyslog. So systemctl start HTTPD. There's the error message that we got from the failed start. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tail a file called var log messages. So syslog will log to a whole bunch of different files, but they're generally stored in the var log directory. There's files for specific services, like there's one for mail, and there's one for cron. And if there's not a specific log for your service, it goes into this general messages file. All right, and we can see from my tail that there's been other things logging to this file, so much so that the actual message I was interested in has scrolled away. So a tail is like the bottom 10 lines of a file, and our message has already scrolled out of that bottom 10 lines. So why don't I use view, which is read-only VI, to go into the var log messages file, and I'll just dump to the bottom, and I'll just scroll up through that list until I get to some lines that look web server-y, right? And what do I mean by web server-y? Well, if we look at the format of the logs, they all have a pretty regular format. They have a date and time. They have a system name. And then they have the actual service that generated the log. So you can see a bunch of these are HTTP service generated. And then at the tail end, this is the actual log error message, right? The logging message itself. So here we can see that HTTPD service referenced but unset environment variable evaluates to empty string. And then it tells me that on line 85 of this ssl.conf file, that there is a file that does not exist or is empty. And that's going to lead me to maybe need to generate a new SSL certificate for this server to work correctly. So you can find the logs that you're interested in by looking from the bottom up to try and go to the time period you're interested in. Or if you actually know the time, a rough time of when this thing occurred, you could go in and search based off of the timestamp and the day to get to a section of the log entries that you're interested in to inspect further. So that's a little bit on using logs. When you have errors, generally services put them places like logs. So looking at things like the var log directory to see if there's server-specific files, or var log messages, which ends up being the catch-all, or if you're trying to start or manage services and you're getting an error out of systemctl, it often tells you, hey, check out this journalctl command to get the service-specific logs associated with this service activity. That'll help steer you in the right direction for moving to the next stage of your troubleshooting, which is trying to figure out what the exact error is and how you can reconcile it. So you know a little bit about logs. Why don't you check out the video in our description, which is a 5-hour Linux troubleshooting video, so you can really fix those busted boxes.